Hi, welcome to the first rule of Nerd Club. My name is Paul, I'm your host. Today's deck tech is on Jon Irenicus Shattered One. In this deck tech, it's not the usual way that people are building this deck. I'm going to be abusing that second ability where I get to draw loads of cards on other people's turns, and I get to draw loads of cards throughout the game. I'm going to really try to use and abuse that by either making creature tokens, or making my creatures massive, or even making people mill cards. Now if that's something that you're interested in, then keep watching the deck tech. Now I have created two deck lists, they're both in the description below. If you want to check them out, then put a comment below to see which one you prefer. One of them is the real salty, nasty one where literally you play the cards and other people hate you throughout the full game. Or you can decide to play this one where it's not so evil and you're kind of abusing that second ability, but at the same time you are doing a little bit of nasty work to them when you're drawing that second card. So obviously the first ability gets you, at the end step, you can then give them one of your creatures, and then they get goaded, and obviously then, hey presto, they've got to attack each turn. That's when we come into the second ability. Whenever a creature you own, but don't control, attacks, you get to draw a card. Hopefully, what we can do is get them at least having 2, maybe 3 creatures each person, so then we can get 2 to 3 draws each turn we are playing. So how do we want to play the deck? Turn 1 you bring out Tormented Soul, Trident, Shore Stalker, or you can bring out maybe Sliverblade. All these creatures are unblockable, so then when you bring out your commander, you can hopefully give them to the opponents, and then you're obviously doing damage like that. Turn 2 you want to try and do a little bit of ramping, maybe bring out Helm of the Awakening, Arcane Signet, Talisman of Dominance. If you haven't managed to get any of them out, then maybe turn 2 you can bring out Invisible Stalker, Blighted Agent. These are once again creatures that are very cheap mana and they're unblockable, so when you bring Commander out, we can give them. You've also got Fairies Vandal. Now this is a great little card. Every time you draw a card, you get a 1/1/1 counter on it. So that means obviously on our turn, we can then start putting them on it, but that means when we give them to the opponent and they draw, so if we can give it to someone who is drawing a lot of cards, that creature is going to get massive and we don't even need to do anything, and then they've got to goad it and attack other opponents every single turn with it, so that can end up being a massive card, which is great. You've also got Ominous Seas, which is a fantastic little enchantment. Every time we draw a card, we get to put a counter on it, and then at the end of 8 draws, we can then hopefully get an 8/8 creature, which is fantastic. We can either keep that for ourselves, so we can either have a blocker, or we attack people with it, or we can give it to other people and let them do the damage of an 8/8 smashing into other people's faces. Now, turn 3, if we have no ramp out, then we can't really get our commander out. Turn 3, you may be able to get it out, but it's only if you've got a good enough hand, so then you can keep feeding it, so then you can keep giving the opponents a creature each turn. If not, then maybe to Fairies to Lage, I think it's called, or Jace's Erasure. Basically what happens is every time you draw a card, the other opponents have to mill, which is fantastic. Turn 4, we need to bring our commander out. There is no other card that comes out on turn 4. Your commander comes out. Then we can start then hopefully giving opponents cards, so then we can then get the second ability. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that, but we need to abuse the second ability. We're not messing about, we need to get that ability. Turn number 5, we'll bring out maybe Endrick, Sahir Master Breeder, maybe Minwile Illusionist, or Alandra Sky Dreamer. These cards here are fantastic because once you draw that second card, they give you tokens, and them tokens then can feed the commander, which is fantastic. We don't need to keep worrying about bringing creatures out. They'll constantly keep feeding and just give them. Obviously they are good because if they can get obviously onto the other board and they can do damage, then that's fantastic. If not, they're just basically creatures we can just give them, which is great. You maybe got Gixian Puppeteer, which is a fantastic card. Every time you draw your second card, it does 2 damage to an opponent and you gain 2 life. Well, with that, hopefully if we can give 2 creatures to every opponent, we can do at least 6 damage, if not more, every single turn, which is fantastic. Then as you want to keep going, you want to obviously bring out cards that help you along the game. So you maybe have like Jace's Arcane Strategist, where basically every time you draw a card, draw your second card, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, which is fantastic. Then we've got things maybe like I can't even pronounce that. It says whenever you draw a card, you put a 1/1 counter on it, which is fantastic because if we can get that out and maybe have a couple of turns, that can get massive. End up giving a 10/10, and then we give that to an opponent. That's a 10/10 massive flying creature that, if no one's got flying, then they're going to be doing massive amount of damage for us. So we're giving them these nice gifts of creatures, which then they can do damage to other people. You've also got things like Gurgling Anointer. It's flying again. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a 1/1 counter on Gurgling, whatever its name is. Then basically when it dies, return a target creature card with mana value less than or equal to its power from your graveyard to the battlefield. Well, if we give that to a person, we don't mind because that creature is going to be doing so much damage to the person. If we can get that maybe up to like an 8/8, 10/10 with flying, hand it to them, unless someone destroys it, which they might do, but if not, then we can get that swinging over and doing some damage. Now, if you're finding value in this video, then hit that like button, hit the subscribe, and let me know what you think. Either do you prefer this deck, or do you prefer the one that's nasty and salty and just brutal, which I do like them decks, and you've probably seen a few of my other decks where I am very brutal. I like to have that target on my back, but I thought, why not try something different, see if we can design this deck a different way, because every other deck I've seen on Moxfield or YouTube, they're pretty much using the same creatures, and I wanted to try something a bit different. So let me know in the comments below which deck tech you prefer. Now then, on to the separate win cons. So obviously with my decks I try to at least have 2 win cons, sometimes 3. I like to have more than 1 because if someone shuts you down, then obviously you are kaput, out of the game. So this win con number 2, you have Watcher in the Water, which is a new card from the new Lord of the Rings set, which is a fantastic card for this deck. Every time you draw a card on an opponent's turn, you get a 1/1 blue tentacle creature. Well, hopefully we'll be making a crap ton of tentacle creatures. You also have Dire Undercurrents on the battlefield. This says whenever a blue creature enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card. So then we can draw a whole deck out with just these 2 cards. But we don't want to do that if we haven't got something on the battlefield that's going to help us. This is where Laboratory Maniac comes onto the equation. You have that on the battlefield, you can then win the game. Or, I prefer this way because it kind of, people aren't really expecting it. You have Psychosis Crawler, so every time you draw a card, the opponent should lose one life basically. So you can then hopefully keep it till that person's turn. You then get to draw these cards, you get to create the tokens, and then as long as you've got at least, well, if they're on 40 life, you've got at least 40 cards in your deck, then you can kill them outright. That's every opponent in one go, which is fantastic. As I say, you've got to have a second win con. I quite like the fact of having the Psychosis Crawler, but you know, it depends on how you want to win the deck. You never know. They might end up killing each other with all your massive creatures that you're giving them. We just don't know. There is no honorable mention in this deck. I normally try and have one, but all the cards seem to just go really well together. I didn't want to just single one single card out. But that's it for this deck tech. We have 2 deck techs coming up. We have Golem Obsessed Stalker. It's a deck where you want to gain loads of life because it's going to do loads of damage to other people. Then you have Rexiel the Risen Deep. Basically this card gets you, well, stealing other people's cards from the graveyard. So it's basically a mill deck where we want them to put as many cards as they can in their graveyards, and then we can then steal their cards, which is fantastic. If that's something that you're looking forward to, then subscribe, hit that bell notification because you'll miss it. If you want to support the channel, then my Patreon link is in the description below. Or if you don't want to sign up to anything and you just want to buy me a coffee, that link is also in the description. If you don't think you have, you know, fully satisfied your deck teching needs, then see if any of these deck techs are what you want to watch next.